Alright guys, if this doesn't work, I might just start Hulk smashing things and flipping tables, because this is my 5th attempt at making this video. Fingers crossed. Welcome to Tarot Vidari. My name is Marielle Diana, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to use a pendulum. Let's hope this one works. Okay, so if you are not familiar with what a pendulum is a weighted object that's attached to a chain or a string. It can be something else, but I'll get more into that when I'm going over different options in case you don't have a store-bought pendulum, so that you can try this out along with me. So one of the great things about using a pendulum is that it allows you to get direct yes-no answers to questions. Now, a lot of people don't like using tarot for direct yes-no. If you do and you have success with that, that's amazing, keep doing it. But for the rest of us who try to avoid tarot for that, having a pendulum that you can pull out to fill in the gaps and answer those questions can be really helpful. Another great thing about it is that when you are first learning to read tarot, it's not uncommon to not be particularly confident in your interpretations, and being able to pull out another tool and check and see if your your understanding or your comprehension of what the cards are trying to tell you is accurate or not can be really handy in getting more accurate readings in the beginning, and building your confidence in your intuition. It can also help for people who are seasoned pros but have a hard time reading for themselves. Now, I feel really lucky that I read for myself really well, but I know that it's a very common problem to struggle with that. So in those cases, when you're trying to read for yourself, if you find yourself struggling with that, or, and this does happen to me too, if I have a situation that I am just way too invested in or way too close to, and I'm struggling to interpret the cards because of that, you can pull out the pendulum and just start checking. Is the reading trying to tell me this, yes or no, and work through like that. So there's benefits to it for new readers as well as seasoned readers alike. Another common use for the pendulum is for clearing energy. You can use it. Now, I'm going to go into how you can find out what your accurate yes and no answer is. But for me, it will swing in the direction for my no response when it is removing energy or clearing a space, and it'll go in my yes response or a positive spin when I'm bringing in energy, and then it'll go back to neutral swing when it's all done with either of those. So it can be helpful for that. A practical use for it is if you're one of the people who likes checking those very generously uploaded pick-a-card readings, you can use the pendulum to find out if a video has a reading for you or not. So you can just ask it, does this video have an accurate reading for me? And if it says yes, then you can find out if it's one pile or multiple piles, and if it's one or more, say there's 2 piles in a 6-pile reading, one pile might be pertaining to your career and another pile could be pertaining to your romantic life. So you can use the pendulum to narrow it down like that as well. So that's pretty helpful. There are other uses, which I'm not going to really dive into in this video, but some people will use pendulums, which is a form of dowsing, in order to find out, what their specific nutritional needs are for the day, if they are sensitive to a certain food or not, if they need to supplement with a particular nutrient that day, how much, how little. So the sky's really the limit, and pendulums are really only limited by our ability to imagine up creative ways to use them. So another way to use the pendulum, it's predominantly thought of as a tool to get yes-no, which is very handy, but you can also use it for getting written words and sentences. Now, I'm not going to get into that in this video, but you can use it with something called a talking board, which looks like this. Hopefully you're not getting too much of a glare. And you can see that. It's a half circle and it has the alphabet divided up into little segmented pie slices. This one has numbers and yes, no as well. If you're interested in learning how to use a talking board, I'd be more than happy to make another video going over that. But essentially what you do is you hold the pendulum over that and you allow it to spell out sentences. So that can be really useful for broadening the horizons of what you can do with the pendulum as well. And I don't use a talking board that often, but I've been able to use it to get very detailed information. I like using it for past life work, finding out about particular lifetimes. Sometimes we might have something going on in this lifetime that we don't realize is something that we're playing out from an unresolved past experience. And having something like the pendulum to be able to get very detailed information to figure out why something's taking place so that you can work to resolve it and clear out the symptom of that experience in this lifetime. So the possibilities are pretty much endless, but we are going to be sticking to yes and no for this. And the reason that I'm using the pendulum my first video that I'm uploading when this is a channel about tarot and reading tarot is because the pendulum really easy to learn. I feel confident that by the time you're done watching this video, you're going to be able to accurately and effectively get direct answers. That's a pretty stark difference from tarot, which really, to get a solid grasp and develop your tarot language can take years, and it is an ongoing unfolding process. You know, I've been reading tarot for 20 years and my tarot vocabulary is constantly evolving. Even to this day, I'm learning new things all day. So that's a journey that really never ends. And it's exciting because of that. But it is also really nice to have a tool in the toolbox that you can pull out and just start using right away today and start getting clear and accurate answers. So using them in conjunction, it can help you build that vocabulary faster and gain confidence in your ability to intuit the answers from the cards. So that being said, before I get into, let's see, there's a couple things I'm going to cover. I want to show you things that you can use if you don't have a store-bought pendulum. And I want to talk about some common oddities that can take place when you're using a pendulum and what that might mean and how you can resolve that. I think that's probably all I'm going to be covering in this video. So let's see, what are some things that you can use? Well, for me, most often when I am going to use a pendulum, I don't have my store-bought pendulum on me. I don't always remember to bring this, but I always have my necklace on me. This gets used 9 times out of 10 if I'm going to be using, probably more than that, if I'm going to be using a pendulum. So you can use the necklace. Back in the day, it was really common for the women to just take a piece of their hair, tie it around a ring, and use that. It doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you have something that is flexible and can move and that you can attach to a heavier object. So in this case, this is a not even 10-cent homemade pendulum that works just fine with an O-ring and some embroidery thread. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah, so nothing fancy and it works. So try it out with a homemade one if you don't have a store-bought one. If you like it and you want to invest in a store-bought one, great. If you're happy with your homemade one, awesome, stick with that. One thing to consider, and I said I'm not going to get into the talking board subject today, but just in case you decide to explore that, in that case, it's important to have a pendulum. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that? That comes to a point like this, because as I showed you, the chart is pretty small. And to have something that can really pinpoint what letter you're on can make a difference in getting accurate readings, because, you know, there's a big difference between an M and an N and between, you know, an X and a Y. So In that case, that's important. That still doesn't mean you have to have a store-bought one. If you can do wrapping and you have a quartz crystal point, you can wrap that, make a little, I can't even think of the word, it's escaping me at the moment, but a little, loop at the top that you can tie your string through, and that'll work. So really the key is just having something that's flexible and that you can attach to the weighted item, and having the weighted item be heavy enough that it creates the necessary tension to pull the string or the chain. And that's it. So now that you know what you can use, or some ideas, let's go ahead and talk about some of the weird things that can happen when you're reading. The first one I'm going to talk about, I honestly have no idea why it happens, but I think that it's worth mentioning. Sometimes when using a pendulum, you might find that the pendulum is kind of going crazy, and I've had it where it's been swinging so big and so hard, and I was holding on to it so tight, I almost had it fly out of my hand, and I've had that happen more times than I can count. I have no idea what causes that, but it does happen, and you might experience it. On the flip side of that, there's another weird thing that can happen, which is when the pendulum becomes locked. And it's kind of weird because no matter how hard you try to be as still as possible, your hand is still going to shake a little bit. And so you expect a little bit of movement. Like you can see this. You see how there's a little bit of movement. Now that's not clearly... let's see. Maybe I need to come a little closer. You know what? Let me lay this out because this might give some contrast for you. Yeah, I think that's going to be a little bit better. Okay. So, I can get really still, and you can see it's still moving a little bit, but that's not like a clear swinging answer. So that's what you're aiming for, unless you're one of the people that likes to start your pendulum off from a swing, and I'm going to cover that too, even though I'm not one of those people. So when this gets locked in place, that usually indicates one of two things to me. One is that occasionally there can be some sort of interference either in your space or in your energy field that needs to be cleared to allow the messages to come through. So you can check, you can use your pendulum to check and see if that's the case, or use your intuition. If you're not sure, go ahead and clear the space anyways, because it can hurt. Another possible reason, and this goes also for when you're sitting there trying to get an answer and the pendulum is barely moving at all, or you're getting kind of scrambled answers. That also could indicate a block in your energy field, but it can, and most often to me, is suggesting that something in the way that I phrase the question isn't allowing for a clear answer. And this is where context comes into play. I know I sound like a broken record in my book because I'm constantly bringing it back to context, but it's probably one of the most vital elements to getting accurate readings, whether it's with a pendulum or tarot cards. Context is everything. So make sure that the way that you're phrasing your questions and the questions that you're asking aren't leaving it open to be misinterpreted, because in that case, it might not be able to give you a clear yes or no. So you can even check, if you're not getting clear results or responses, you can ask, do I need to rephrase the question, or do I need to reframe the question? And if it says yes, that's what your issue is. If you're still getting a scrambled answer, then go ahead and clear the energy. Another thing that will happen, now every time I'm starting a new session with a pendulum, the first thing I do is I ask my defining yes and no questions. So what that is that's a question that I know for a fact the answer is yes, and I know for a fact the answer is no to, and I'll ask those. So, I've been using a pendulum for 20 years now. I know what my yes response is, and I know what my no response is. It's been the same for 15 years. For the first 5 years, it was something different, and then it changed. But, so if I ask my yes question and I start getting the opposite swing to it, to me that also signifies that I have some sort of energy block, or my energy's flipped and I need to fix it. So that's something to keep in mind too. So I think that I've covered most of the weird things that can happen when you're using a pendulum. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can determine what your accurate yes response is and your accurate no response is. So for me, I use something I know for a fact the answer is yes to. I use my given name. So what I'll do, and these are a couple things to keep in mind. You can try both ways and see what you like. I tend to be a bit analytical, and for me, I like to remove, I'm going to say perceived influences. So I stabilize my elbow. Now, I don't typically do it in this weird position where I'm leaning over a table. I'm usually in a much more comfortable position, so I might have to stabilize my hand with my other hand. So if you see me doing this, it's just me working to stabilize it so I remove some of my shaking. I like to start with the pendulum as still as possible. Alternatives to that some people prefer. Some people like having the chain really short or the string really short and using it like that. And another alternative is that some people will pick a neutral swing to start it in so that it already has momentum. And then from there, they ask their question and allow the answer to come out using the momentum that's already built up. Now, personally, I like letting it build its own momentum, but that's just me, and there's no right or wrong. There's just whatever works for you. So I'm going to go ahead and start. Okay. I'm going to ask something to verify that my answers are coming out how I know them to be. Is my given name Marielle Diana? So hopefully you can see that. It's going clockwise, which for me is a yes response. Yeah, okay, you can see that. Good. Now, I don't normally take this long to get my yes answer, but for the sake of clarity, I'm letting it go a little bit longer. So now I'm going to check for my no response. Am I currently 56 years old? So we've got a counterclockwise spin, which is my normal yes and no. So for you, an accurate yes answer could be the same as me. It could be clockwise for yes, counterclockwise for no. It could be the opposite. An accurate yes or no could also be a side-to-side swing and a forward back. What I have found is that if you have a preference for how you want the pendulum to communicate with you, you can specify that, and I've never seen a time when the pendulum was unwilling to respond in the manner that you wanted it to respond in. So that's something to keep in mind if you have a preference. From this point, you can go ahead, now that you know what your yes is, you know what your no is, you can jump right into asking questions. Now, I'd recommend if you're planning on going through a long series of questions with your pendulum, you might want to take out a notepad and just jot it down because it can be hard to remember the answers when you're 100 questions deep into a pendulum session. And that goes twice as much for using the talking board. because when you're going through the process and it's spelling out sentences letter by letter and you're doing, detailed readings, you can spend a couple hours working on one reading. So having either somebody there where you can call out what the letters are can be helpful, but if you don't have somebody there, you can record yourself doing it and just say the letters out loud, so when you go back and watch the video, you can then spell everything out and figure out what the pendulum was telling you at that point. So that's another option. Something else I forgot to mention that pendulums can be used for really any form of dowsing, whether that's pendulums or dowsing rods or sway testing, can be used for locating lost items. So real quick to run you through that, because that's very simple, you can either ask yes/no questions, like is the lost item upstairs, is it downstairs, is it in a drawer, and just work your way through. You can also ask for the pendulum to point to the object that's missing, and then that can tell you the direction to go in. So let's see, what do I have? I have two of those actually, so I shouldn't say that. Swing in the direction of my computer. Okay, let me stabilize. Swing in the direction of my computer. So I know you can't see it in the video, but my laptop is right there in the direction that it's swinging. If you're watching this, I know it's really hard to tell because it's a very visceral experience to use a pendulum, and so you kind of just have to try it to feel the difference. But when you're asking for direction, obviously it's going to be swinging in two different directions, so how do you know which direction to go in? It's really simple. When you're holding this, you can feel that the pendulum is making almost a sweeping motion in the direction that it's going in. So the feeling that it has on the pullback does not feel anything like the feeling that it has when it's going in the direction of the lost item. And the same thing goes for when the pendulum's swinging. So I know when watching somebody else use a pendulum, it almost looks like, oh wow, it looks like your hand is swinging it. But what you don't realize is when you're getting an accurate answer, when it's the one communicating, there's this sensation of almost like it's being held and pulled like this. And so that can actually make your hand move, because ultimately you're sitting here as a bystander, you're trying to stay as still as possible, and you have this item in your hand that's being pulled. So you're just going to have to try it to see what I'm talking about. It's pretty neat. If you try it out and you experience that and you can feel that, leave a comment and let me know, because it's just a bizarre experience. And again, you have to try it to understand what I'm talking about. So one last thing that I want to cover, I think that this is a really important element to getting successful readings with a pendulum, especially, is that when you're going into it, you want to detach yourself from an outcome. You don't want to go into it expecting a yes or no response, or trying to influence it to hear something that you're wanting to hear, because ultimately you're only hurting yourself by doing that. The point of using these tools is to find out what the truth is. You want to find out what reality is, so that you can know what to prepare for, so that if you need to make necessary course corrections, you can do that. And if you are going into it trying to get the answer that you're wanting to hear instead of trying to find out what's true and accurate, you're really robbing yourself of the opportunity to be, prepared for what's going to be taking place, whether that's positive or negative. And you might be missing out on an opportunity for an experience to learn or grow. And a lot of times, if we can see the course that we're heading in and we don't like it, do something different. Avoid that outcome. But trying to make the outcome say what you're wanting it to be, really, if you're going to do that, there's no point in doing the reading anyways. Just fantasize in your head about the outcome that you're wanting, because ultimately you're just lying to yourself. So if you can go into it as neutral as possible, that's going to allow you to allow accurate messages to come out. And again, that comes with pendulums. That also comes with tarot, though. You know, each tarot card can be interpreted at least 20 different ways, and that's not counting the ways that will intuitively come to you through a reading in the moment. I still have that happen where I'll be in the middle of a reading and all of a sudden a card that I've known like the back of my hand for 20 years will have a completely new and different meaning just all of a sudden out of the blue. So, you know, you want to keep yourself open to getting those messages. And sometimes the outcome that's going to happen from a situation might not be what we're wanting to hear, but it's what's true. And so it's best to be able to get that information so that you can start making the necessary plans in your life or changes to avoid that. So yeah, I did want to say that. I also want to, I showed you this chart and I was just thinking somebody made this and I want to give them credit for it, because you can just do an internet search for free pendulum charts and you can find a million different charts for free. But I want to give this guy credit because he made it. It says designed by Tim Doyon, maybe Doyon, paranormal investigator. Visit me at MySpace, www.myspace.com/finders creepers. Okay, well, regardless of a cheesy name, the charts work the same, so that's a good one. But you can find pendulum charts for everything imaginable, from, you know, different ailments to supplements to, you know, really, you wouldn't believe it. There's hundreds of free charts out there. I even have a book that's just a book of various charts. But anyways, I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. If you have any questions or if there's anything that you don't feel like I addressed or something you would like me to go into more detail with, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll check that out. If enough people have the same question, then I can always make a supplemental video to follow this up with. And if you're interested in seeing more videos like this where I'm going into different divination tools, and also primarily the channel is going to be based around tarot, where I'll be sharing tips, tricks, and insights that I've gained over the past 20 years that have allowed me to gain confidence and develop my tarot vocabulary and really unlock my potential. So what I'm wanting to do is help give that to you, because in my opinion, if you had the calling to tarot, it's because your unique voice was needed and is needed. And we don't need 100 of the same exact people reading the same exact way, giving the same exact messages. We need unique voices. We need unique styles, because what one person might need, the message that they might need delivered, you might be the perfect delivery vehicle for that. Your style might be exactly what they're needing, where my style might be too brash and abrasive. So, you know, we're all needed in this, and your voice is important, and I want to help you identify that and gain confidence in that and bring that out. So if that's something that you're interested in learning about, feel free to subscribe to my channel and hit the notification bell. I'm going to be trying to come out with weekly videos. Now, this is my first video, and this is my 5th attempt at this video. So, hopefully the future ones will go smoother and I'll be able to put out a video each week. But again, thank you for joining me, and if you found this useful, please give the video a thumbs up, leave any comments below, and I will check those out and get back to you. Okay, thanks. Bye.